Hello, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another video. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu, and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history, and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. Many great thinkers were eccentric, such as Socrates, who often walked barefoot, such as Immanuel Kant, who followed a very rigid lifestyle, a lifestyle that many of us would consider nowadays as ridiculous and insane. They were so eccentric that many people keep wondering why they were different from ordinary people. Is it because they engaged themselves so deep in thinking that their behavior appeared eccentric? Or is it because their eccentric lifestyles facilitated them to become great thinkers? In any case, Henry David Thoreau was surely another philosopher who was great and eccentric. In fact, he was so eccentric that some people only know about him through a joke as the man who spent half of his life in jail and the other half on a water pound. Henry David Thoreau was an American philosopher, born in Massachusetts in 1817 and died quite young at the age of 45. During his lifetime, Thoreau was not widely well known, and his work was not appreciated by too many people, although he was often mentioned within the local literary circle as a friend of Emerson, who had a much higher reputation. However, the fame of Thoreau began to overshadow that of Emerson at the beginning of the 20th century, when his writings on nature and civil disobedience became highly influential for later philosophical thinkers and leaders of social movements. Thoreau is nowadays considered as one of the greatest thinkers in America. But he was also a naturalist, a poet, and a writer. Today's video is not about him as a great thinker or writer, although I will touch upon his philosophical ideas and his writing. Instead, I'm going to focus on him as an eccentric individual and how he lived up to his philosophy in an eccentric way. Thoreau's eccentricity is symbolized by his unconventional behavior and his unusual lifestyle. As I said earlier, he is best remembered nowadays as the man who spent half of his life in jail and the other half at a water pound. The story of his jail life is funny but thought-provoking. Thoreau was on his way to run an errand when the local sheriff stopped him and asked about his failure to pay a poor tax. Back in those years, there was no such thing as an income tax, but everyone in Massachusetts had to pay a poor tax, which was roughly the amount of $1. Thoreau had refused to pay it because he said he didn't want to support a government that was carrying out unethical policies by supporting slavery and by going to war with Mexico. The sheriff made it clear to him that if he did not pay the tax immediately, he would have to arrest him. However, Thoreau once again said no to the sheriff, even though he knew he had $1 in his pocket. Without protesting or any resistance, Thoreau walked into jail. However, he didn't stay there for too long because the next morning his aunt came and paid the money for him, and he was released. Thoreau actually didn't want to leave the jail because by going to prison, he was making a point not only to himself but to the whole world in a sense. Why should we pay taxes to a government we don't like? By doing so, he was also raising an even more important question. Why should we pay taxes at all? Though Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of America, had famously said, "Nothing in this world can be said to be certain except death and taxes," paying taxes shouldn't be that simple, according to Thoreau. Paying taxes should be considered as a contract between the government and its citizens. But the questions are, did we ever sign the contract in the first place? Did we ever agree how much we should pay and for what we should pay? Can we not pay for certain services that we don't need? Most of all, should we be punished for breaking a contract that wasn't created and doesn't exist? We have always taken it for granted that everyone should pay tax. But Thoreau's refusal to pay tax should offer us some food for thought. If you think deeply about all of this, his eccentric behavior in this part of his life may not be so eccentric at all. The other half of his life, which he spent on the bank of a water pond, is even more famous, which, in the opinion of many people nowadays, is certainly eccentric and unconventional. It all came from him hand-building a small cabin at Warden Pond near Concord in 1845. He had long wanted to live in a quiet place where he could enjoy nature and keep a journal about the wildlife and the outdoors. Living in the cabin by himself, he mostly only ate fruits and vegetables he found growing wild, and the beans he planted himself. Most days, he went fishing, swimming, or rowing, or he would find himself observing and recording wildlife and plants. Other times, he was busy reading and writing. The solo life gave him huge satisfaction, but his real purpose was to do an experiment. Could he live a simple and self-sufficient life, away from hustles and bustles of society? 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days later, when he read through all the journals and counted the days he had worked, what he found was startling. He wrote, "For years I maintained myself thus solely by the labor of my hands, and I found that by working about 6 weeks in a year, I could meet all the expenses of living." Therefore, he said, he could use the whole of his winters, as well as most of his summers, to be free and clear for study. More importantly, the freedom he thus earned and enjoyed led him to doubt and question the way of life for many people who were arduously working all year round. For him, these people were money-rich but time-poor. Out of Thoreau's Warden Pond experience came Warden, a book of 18 essays. It is a book on labor, leisure, self-reliance, and individualism. In the book, Thoreau described the intimacy with nature, its sounds, smells, and look of woods and water in different seasons. He explained how he learned to fulfill his desire to live as simply and self-sufficiently as possible. He commented on the meaning of work and leisure and value of freedom. To live the best life is to make every moment of life meaningful. According to Thoreau, happiness only comes from within, and a simple life brings inner peace. For him, being close to nature was the ultimate life goal. The book turned out to be tremendously inspirational to many of his contemporaries. Even nowadays, many people who worked 40 hours a week, 50 weeks or more a year, find this book thought-provoking and have gained wisdom from this book. Another very famous book of Thoreau's is titled Disobedience. This book, which calls for resistance to immoral and unjust government actions, also became a huge inspiration for many people, including Mahatma Gandhi of India's independence movement of the 1930s and Martin Luther King Jr. of American civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s. Before I finish this video, I must point out that in spite of his eccentric behavior and rejection of conventional life and traditions, Thoreau was not antisocial, to use a modern term. He once said, "I had 3 chairs in my house, 1 for solitude, 2 for friendship, 3 for society." He valued society, but not at the expense of his own free spiritual needs. For him, freedom was more valuable than anything else. Experiencing nature firsthand kept his life more meaningful and kept his senses sharp. Looking at his eccentric life, I can't help wondering how many of us can live a life as he did in this day and age. Thoreau's philosophy and his lifestyle often remind me of Laozi, the founder of Daoism in China. Those of you who have watched my videos on Daoism and Laozi may have realized that the two have a lot in common. It is true that Thoreau and Laozi came from different eras and cultures, but they shared a very similar philosophical outlook. Both emphasized simple living, harmony with nature, and limited government. They arrived at comparable conclusions through their separate reflections on nature and governance. I will probably make a video comparing their philosophies in more detail. If you are interested, please subscribe. Well, I think that is all that I wanted to talk about in today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.